The last thing that we're going to discuss in this series of lessons is the Liquify tool. Now this is actually one of the more advanced controls in Adobe Photoshop. However, it's also one of the most widely used. It's used badly a lot of the time. A lot of people go way too over the top when they're liquefying. However, there have been some new introductions to this tool in the most recent permutation of Adobe Photoshop, which we are going to have a look at now. So what we need to do is we've got our image opened up like so, and we're going to duplicate the layer by pressing Command and J, and then we're going to go straight into the Liquify tool at the top in the filters menu. Now there are a lot of new features here which didn't used to be here before. However, we're going to go through the new ones first so that we can show you the power of those, and then we're going to go and show you how to do the more basic stuff. So we actually have now this menu here, which is the face aware liquify, which means that Photoshop will figure out where the face is, and then it will allow you to adjust certain parts of the dimensions of the face by just using these sliders. So for example, you can use the eye size. It's detected the eyes, as you can see if I wiggle them up and down. Whee! So you can adjust the size of the eyes, and you can make people look very freaky indeed by using this. You've seen the videos where people make caricatures of themselves. You can play around with these sliders to make a right mess of things. You can make them enormous eyes. You can tilt them. You can make them further apart. Now we can play with the nose. You can change the nose's height. You can give them a you can give them a really cartoony appearance. You can go full on manga with these things if you want to. And now you've got the mouth. You can give her a bigger smile. You can make the upper lip fatter or thinner. You can do the same with the lower lip. And you can play with the width of the mouth as well. And you can be quite funny with these things. You can change the size of the brow, you can change the size of the chin, you can squash or widen the jawline, you can make the face wider or thinner. There's a lot of fun to be had with this. So that's one of the new tools that you can play with. So I don't use any of those. I'm going to come out of there just rather than messing around, and I'm going to go back into the Liquify tool like this. So how do we subtly change the dimensions of the face in this case without going to extremes and being noticeable? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the forward warp tool, which is the very top option. Looks like a finger pushing a line. So the first thing you want to do before you click anywhere inside the image is look at your brush tool options. I'm going to close down the face aware liquify options here, and I'm going to just close down that there. So we've got the brush tool options. Size is largely irrelevant at the moment. Density and rate, not so much either. Pressure is what you want to focus on. Now I never go any higher than 2 on my pressure, and here's why. If you go up to 50 and then you click, that's the outcome. So I'm going to Control Z, and I'm going to come down to 2. I'm going to just type it in there. There we go. Now if you're on 2, you can now very subtly make adjustments to the image. And really, when you're trying to make changes look realistic and subtle, if all you're doing is, for example, the pose doesn't flatter the model's jawline, for example, and you're just trying to pull it in a little bit so that it actually resembles the model in real life, then you can just be very subtle. And you can see that the changes that I'm making are incredibly subtle, but they are changes, and they make all of the difference. So it's very, very vitally important that you don't go too mad when you're doing this, because you just end up with an unrealistic looking image which doesn't flatter the person. It just makes it look silly. It's one of those things where, yes, I do get a lot of women asking me to tuck bits in and fold bits and so on and so forth when I take pictures of them, but if you go too far, they don't appreciate it because it's too obvious that the changes have been made, and people will look at the picture and immediately identify that it's been tampered with in some way. That's not what we're after. We don't want our clients to think that we have deemed their body unworthy and therefore decided to remake the work of the great man. So we need to be very subtle and very careful. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that you're not just changing the side of her face. Anything that was in this area of the picture whilst I was tampering with the side of her face there will also have been stretched. So you need to be very mindful of the changes that you're making and how they are affecting the area around. One of the reasons that white background high key is so popular is because you can adjust the dimensions of the model without making any obvious changes to any background, because there is no background, it's just a high key white. So it's one of those situations that subtlety is best, less is more. So the only other tool that I really use most of the time is the pucker tool, which is just here, which you can achieve by pressing the S key. And what the pucker tool is useful for, and some of you may have noticed that I was doing it when I did the speed retouch, is adjusting the edge of the lips. And the reason that that is useful is because what it does is it pulls everything in to the center of this brush. Everything that's in this circle gets pulled in towards the center. Now you can see that there's a slight bump on the makeup here, which we can remedy just by using the pucker tool. There you go. So, and then you can keep going over it until you're happy. Now again, subtlety is very important here, because if you go too far you'll end up with such a hard edge that it's obvious that it's been adjusted. So now if I go to there, now I went a bit too far when I did that, and as you can see it's obvious that it's been adjusted. So if I press Command Z or Control Z, I can undo it. There we go. So anyway, that is the Liquify tool and how to use it. And I hope you've enjoyed this series of lessons, and we'll be doing much more in the future, so stay tuned.